Tonight's big stories, Defense Secretary Teodoro speaks up, describing China's latest harassment against the Philippine Coast Guard as a form of pananakop or invasion. Transport groups call for jeepney fare hikes of at least 2 pesos in light of rising fuel prices. But the LTFRB is taking its time, citing the need to do a balancing act.
And former broadcaster Jay Sonza was arrested for alleged fraud as well as involvement in syndicated and large-scale illegal recruitment.
Welcome to the big story. I'm Regina Lay. I'm Maricel Halili.
And I'm Sean Yao.
Pinapatigil nila tayo, wala naman tigil ang pananakop nila. Simple lang naman sa akin yun eh. Okay naman makipag-usap eh, basta tabla.
You just heard Defense Secretary Teodoro speaking on China's latest aggression and the building of structures in the West Philippine Sea. This, of course, follows the recent water cannon incident at the Ayungin Shoal. He made the remarks earlier today during his visit to the new EDCA, or Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement site in Isabela. The Defense Secretary says the Philippines should stand up against any form of harassment within its territory. He says no amount of Chinese propaganda can ever hide Beijing's intention to control and invade the entire South China Sea. Teodoro also says the rumored agreement to remove the BRP Sierra Madre from Ayungin is part of this propaganda.
Ito ang posisyon namin na nasa gobyerno na talagang kailangan tumayo tayo sa China, sa ginawa nila sa Ayungin, at huwag tayong pumayag na pagapang sila na papalapit sa Pilipinas, sa ating exclusive economic zone. Kailangan tayuan nito eh.
These harassments, described by Teodoro as intensifying external threats, are the reasons why he wants to expedite the establishment of these new EDCA sites. These new sites are described by the U.S. as a key pillar of the U.S.-Philippine alliance to support combined trainings, exercises, and interoperability between the nation's forces. Under the EDCA, U.S. troops will have access to select military bases of the AFP. These new EDCA new sites are located in Naval Base Camilo Osias in Santa Ana, Cagayan, Camp Melchor de la Cruz in Gamo, Isabela, Balabac Island in Palawan, and Lalo Airport in Cagayan. The U.S. will fund the construction of these facilities.
Let's get more details about Secretary Teodoro's inspection of some of these new EDCA sites from Brian Castillo. Hi, Brian. What happened today?
During his visit to Camp Melchor de la Cruz in Gamo, Isabela, Teodoro inspected the vacant lots that will be used for the construction of EDCA projects. 8 projects will possibly begin by next year. These include the Command and Control Fusion Center, Logistics Warehouse, and Training Center. The Defense Department is also eyeing to construct a naval facility facing the Philippine Rise or Benham Rise, which Teodoro said could boost our capabilities in defending our exclusive economic zone. From Isabela, Teodoro flew to Nueva Ecija to inspect another EDCA site at Fort Magsaysay. There, construction is ongoing for facilities needed for humanitarian assistance and disaster response. Construction of these is targeted to be completed by January next year. Sean?
Thanks for that, Brian Castillo.
The recent incident near the disputed Ayungin Shoal is the latest flare-up in a long-running territorial conflict in the resource-rich waters of the South China Sea involving China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Taiwan, and Brunei. But where exactly are the disputed areas? Let's discuss that further. The disputes involve the islands, reefs, banks, and other features of the South China Sea, including the Spratly Islands, Paracel Islands, Scarborough Shoal, and various boundaries in the Gulf of Tonkin, as you can see in this map. Focusing on the Spratly Islands, this consists of more than 100 small islands or reefs surrounded by rich fishing grounds and potentially by gas and oil deposits. Of the known islands or reefs in the area, the Philippines is known to be occupying 7. These are the Pag-asa Island, Likas Island, Parola Island, Lawak Island, Kota Island, Patag Island, and Panata Island. Other claimant nations also have their own occupied islands. As for the Scarborough Shoal, this is a small ring of reefs that lies about 230 from the Philippines and 650 kilometers from the nearest major Chinese landmass, the southern island province of Hainan. There are no structures built on Scarborough Shoal, but the feature is effectively controlled by China, which has maintained a constant Coast Guard presence at the feature since 2012. But in 1999, the Philippines positioned BRP Benguet at Scarborough Shoal. China immediately requested the Philippines to relocate the vessel, and the Philippines promptly agreed to comply. But the country actually only withdrew the vessel from the Scarborough Shoal shortly before the official visit of Chinese Premier Zhu Rongji to Manila, also in 1999. And this action is what China says is the reason why it wants BRP Sierra Madre out of a Union Shoal.
Our guest tonight is someone who's intimately familiar with disputes in the West Philippine Sea. Joining us live in the studio right here, we have former Senator Sonny Trillanes. Good evening, sir. Welcome to The Big Story. Thanks for being here.
Hi, sir.
I'm sure you've been following recent incidents
yes.
keenly.
Yes.
Your initial thoughts on the matter?
Well, it's alarming, really, because the situation there is escalating abruptly, and this was brought about by the fire hosing of our Coast Guard vessel. And it's getting close to the situation we were in back in 2012, wherein we had this standoff in Scarborough Shoal. I remember then the Chinese employed the swarming tactics in the shoal, and they brought in almost 100 ships of varying sizes in and around the shoal. And
To block Philippine ships.
yes, and
Philippine boats.
we only had 3 ships there from the Philippine Coast Guard, and that escalated almost into a shooting war, and that's why we had to resort to back-channel negotiations to de-escalate the situation. And eventually, almost all of these ships, except 3, remained outside the Scarborough Shoal. So we were able to resolve that. Right now, the situation is getting closer and closer to that situation.
Right. Back in 2012, former Senator Trillanes, we made the decision to take our boats out. And the Chinese Coast Guard, they never left Scarborough, right? Right now, they're claiming that the Philippines made a promise to remove the BRP Sierra Madre from Ayungin. Given that, you know, we have learned from the past, or it has sort of happened in the past, where should the Philippine government move? Should they listen to China? Should they reinforce the Sierra Madre? What would you do if you were still doing negotiations with China?
Well, let me just correct you with that statement that we left and they did not. Well, as I mentioned, back in 2012, around May, there are almost 100 Chinese vessels there, and only 3 are left. So they left. The 3 who were left behind are situated outside the Scarborough Shoal. And that's the reason why President Aquino filed the arbitration case. So it's not entirely accurate that to say that our 3 ships left and they did not, because they did. That's why we resolved that impasse. Okay, so people will just have to Google and retrace what happened during that time, because it can guide us to how we would be able to resolve the situation. Now, to answer your question, should we reinforce or repair the BRP Sierra Madre? Most definitely. And the Philippine Navy is a master in maintaining old ships. We have World War II vintage ships, even when I was still in the Navy. And Navy personnel are are so adept in maintaining that. However, at some point, I don't know when, the Navy personnel were pulled out and they were replaced by Marine personnel. And their skill sets are different. The Marines are focused on the security aspect, but for Navy personnel, it's inherent for them to maintain the vessel. So I think the first step is to assign, in addition to the Marines, some Navy personnel who will maintain the BRP Sierra Madre. They can bring this back to at least 90% of its original state.
Sir, going back to the Scarborough Shoal issue, you mentioned that you consider this as a mission accomplished on your part.
Yes.
Right? So how did the negotiation, how was the negotiation between you and the Chinese authorities back in the days? Ano yung mga napag-usapan nyo before that we can apply in the recent incident in Ayungin?
Okay, let's just remember the situation back in 2012 is very different from the situation now. Back in 2012, there was a leadership change happening in China, and there was also a leadership change happening in the US. And both of these countries were pushing for the de-escalation of the situation. So they were so happy to just pull out and keep the peace in Scarborough. But the China in 2023 is different. Back then, we were dealing with President Hu Jintao of China. President Xi Jinping has other plans. So these factors or these
Different how,
variables.
Senator?
Well, again, the timing. Because of the leadership change happening back in 2012 in China, they were very conscious about any obstacles to the rise of Xi Jinping, because there was another faction that's pushing for another candidate outside Xi Jinping. And back then, also in November in 2012, the U.S. was also having their own elections, the election bid of President Obama. So those geopolitical circumstances helped in the resolution of that impasse. So again, from almost 100 Chinese ships in and around Scarborough, we reduced it to 3 because of the negotiations.
Senator, since we're on the subject, sorry, let me just jump in here. One of the lingering questions about that back channeling in 2012 was who exactly funded your trips. If I'm not mistaken, you went to Beijing 16 times,
No,
right?
that's the fake news of Mr. Enrile. Apparently, people have
Okay,
been
so how many times
absorbing.
did you go?
Okay, I explained this so many times. Well, I'll give you a copy of the video of the full explanation. But the total negotiations lasted for 3 months, and I had 7 meetings here in Manila and 7 meetings in China.
Okay.
Those trips were sanctioned and funded by President Aquino.
By the office of the president.
Yes.
And he was the one
Okay.
who actually
So-
asked you to do the back channels.
So
right?
it's not true that it was China who was funding your trips to Beijing.
That's absurd. Again, that's fake news. Apparently, you're a victim, Ms. Edge, of the fake news
Which is,
of...
this is why we're having you in the
yes, and
studio to
that's-
clarify. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm saying that's the fake news, that's a propaganda of Enrile and Mr. Duterte. Again, if they found out anything wrong about what I did, they were in office for 6 years. They had the DFA, the documents in Malacanang, everything. But they couldn't find any, only intrigues and fake news. Now, again, you have to go back to that. What happened then? There was an impasse. It almost erupted into a shooting war. That's why we needed to de-escalate. All countries linked to that incident wanted to de-escalate, and we did. Okay?
By all countries, you mean the Philippines, China, and the United States?
Yes, all interested parties to that.
Sorry, and just to be very, very clear about it, when you say President Aquino funded your trips, was it out of public funds or his own pocket?
I believe out of the intelligence funds, I can imagine.
Okay.
And that's what the intelligence funds are for, and not for the Department of Education or whatnot.
Okay, you mentioned President Duterte. Things changed, of course, as we know. There was a foreign policy shift during Duterte time. But he also recently went to Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
Like you said, things change. What might you imagine was that for?
Well, I think it's just a social event, because the visit of or the meeting of Mr. Duterte was never sanctioned by President Marcos. So anything he says there won't have any
It's not official, basically.
won't have any value. Yeah.
Baka he was also back-channeling, do you think?
If you're a back-channel negotiator, you would have to have the authority of the president. Otherwise,
President
you're just a
Marcos
guest.
said he did know President Duterte was going there. Alam daw niya.
Knowledge of that visit is different from authorizing a back-channel negotiations. So people should need to review and brush up on what back-channeling negotiations are, because this is a foreign policy tool used by states, which to resolve issues that are not resolved by the front channel.
The norm, the usual diplomacy.
Yeah, the
Sir,
front channel.
on a Union incident,
Yeah.
of course, before we can invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty between the Philippines and the U.S., there must be an armed attack. With the recent incident, the water cannon incident, can we consider that as an armed attack?
Sadly, it's not part of the definition of an armed attack. These kinds of incident happened also around in 2012 in the Senkaku Islands of Japan. And when the Chinese vessels started fire hosing the Japanese vessels retaliated by also using water cannons. So they just did that. It's a gray area, and the Chinese are pushing the envelope. They have approximated already that the Philippines would have a benign response. But the thing is, it's unifying the whole country, because people are getting aware and agitated and alarmed by the situation. So there is this patriotic fervor that's happening. And here's the thing. Pag tumatapang ang taong bayan, tumatapang ang policymakers. So the policymakers need that. So I think if there's one thing that China did, it's to unify the
Sir, may
country.
tatanong lang ako. Siyempre, alam naman natin, like you said, diba? Iba yung nangyari dati, iba rin yung ngayon. There's a different feeling to it, iba na siya. Iba na rin yung panahon. Siyempre, yung isa daw nagbago doon ay na-expand yung EDCA sites dito sa country. Of course, not saying that one led to another, but sabay kasi siya nangyayari, di ba? You think there's correlation? Is this reactionary, maybe China's reaction to our expanded EDCA or enhanced defense cooperation with the U.S.?
Definitely, that's the root cause for all of this. All of that is part of the policy shift of President Marcos from a pro-Beijing Duterte administration. Now you have a pro-Western allies foreign policy of President Marcos, and part of that is the EDCA. And I think this aggressiveness and hostility coming from China is part of its leveraging to posture against the foreign policy of President Marcos.
Do you agree with this move of President Marcos to perhaps not the whole foreign policy shift back to the West, but to expand EDCA? Because in the lead up to the 2022 elections, and you ran, I think you were on YouTube everywhere, basically saying that President Marcos should pursue this. But way back when, I think President Pinoy time, you weren't so keen on EDCA. So even your views on that changed?
No, actually, I was instrumental in breaking the impasse of the EDCA. Before, they were they thought it was the concurrence of the Senate was needed, but then when we didn't have the numbers, the president then shifted to an executive agreement, and we achieved the same result. Then also, I fully support the EDCA, and it is something that we need to do to balance or to counter this expansionist agenda of China.
Speaking of changing times,
Yeah.
is it fair to say that you're a lot less critical of this government than the previous one? I mean,
Most-
I've noticed you're a lot less vocal lately.
Yeah. Well, most definitely, and it's because of the policies.
Foreign
rather.
policy?
Not
Everything
Specifically,
policy.
or
Not
everything?
Everything. The EJK policies, we don't have that anymore. The political persecution, we don't have that. The media harassments, of course, and of course this foreign policy shift. And in short, we have this democratic space that we have been longing for the past 6 years, and we welcome that. Of course, there are some missteps also on the economic front, but from where we came from, we're now able to breathe.
Wow, Senator, that's high praise. Would you ever go to the other side if you were invited to be a part of the
Well,
alliance?
right now I'm focused on the academe, so I've been teaching, and ever since I've been very objective. I'm not a lifelong oppositionist or contrarian. No, objectively, if an administration is good, then we need to support it. If not, then we have to object to it.
And is that one of the reasons why I heard you're planning to run for mayoralty race in Caloocan?
Well, it's one of the considerations. We're right now doing some groundwork, consultation work, because of course Metro Manilans would readily agree that Caloocan is one of the most backward cities in Metro Manila. So change has to happen, and I was born and raised there, so we'll see.
So you haven't actually decided whether you're running or not?
Not yet. We're getting the pulse of the people. We're consulting with them as regards what needs to be done in Caloocan. Then I'll assess if I can deliver the change that they've been longing for.
All right, sir, of course, everybody knows when you came to national attention, you were part of the AFP. I remember it was the eve of my 21st birthday when I found out who you were.
Ayun na, you can calculate how old you are.
Because, yeah. So, having said that, right now, you mentioned there have been missteps on the economic front, and of course, that's a difficult act to balance for any administration, given, of course, the global climate. Lately, of course, one military concern is the reforms to the pension system, because we are at risk for economic collapse. I'm sure you've read about it. What are your thoughts on that? Since you're already here, we get to ask you anything.
Okay. We have been pushing for the pension reform of the MUPs. And we started way back when I was the chairman of the Committee on Defense. But back then, we have been pushing for the reforms to apply only to the new entrants, those who are coming in. Because if you apply it to the active personnel, the net result is you'd have to reduce their salaries. And that's against the universal principles of labor law, that you cannot reduce the salaries of the personnel. So we have to apply it to the new entrants only. And I think that's the direction being undertaken by this administration. So we will welcome that. It's not immediate. But down the road, 20 years from now, you'll be able to resolve the problem.
So another check in the box for
For the Marcos administration.
For the current administration, as far as Senator Sonny Trillanes is concerned. Baka next time you come here, you're in the administration slate already. I'm kidding. Thank you so much for your insights tonight and
Thanks, ma'am.
speaking to us candidly. That was former Senator Sonny Trillanes. We're going to pause for a quick break right now.
But right after that, transport groups are calling for a fare hike once again after another round of oil price increases. The details when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back. You are still watching the big story here in One News. A little bit of bad news now. Diesel prices are up for the 6th straight week, putting more stress on the public transport sector. Diesel prices have gone up by more than 12 pesos per liter since July. Gas prices likewise are up close to 8 pesos after weeks of back-to-back increases. The TFRB is now studying the proposal for a 2 peso fare hike for jeepneys. The agency says it may take them 2 weeks to decide on the petition.
Masusin namin pinag-aaralan dahil baka sa taas po namin ang presyo ng pamasahe po, tumaas din naman ho yung presyo ng bilihin.
2 weeks to decide on the petition, but I believe the first petition was filed right after SONA pa. So medyo more than 2 weeks na yata yun.
To be honest, it's getting harder to keep track of the petitions for fare hikes kasi oil prices have been on an upward trajectory
And
for
the
most of
higher.
this year. Ang dami na.
dami
that
talaga.
it will go on until October.
Oo, according to projections by S&P, by the
Yes.
DOE also, the Oil Industry Bureau.
Yeah, we actually have a soundbite on that. Let's listen in.
Napaka-volatile ng presyuhan. Kasi halos day-to-day, may nangyayaring mga developments that affect the oil market. Generally, kapag second half of the year, talagang pataas yung presyo dahil tumataas ang demand.
Linawin lang muna natin na meron nga fuel subsidy na one time na bibigay yung gobyerno pero one time lang ito. So hindi ko alam kung madadagdagan pa. Alright. Meanwhile, di lang yon ang bad news for our commuters. Road users driving through the Cavitex will also need to worry about higher toll fees starting August 21. We have mobile journalist Patrick Laki to talk to us about what to expect. Go ahead, Patrick.
That's right, Sean. As early as now, Cavitex users should save up a bit more if they're gonna use the expressway. For Class 1 vehicles, the toll fee will be 35 pesos, Class 2, 70 pesos, and Class 3, 104 pesos. The Toll Regulatory Board says this latest toll hike is based on a 2017 petition. By contract, Cavitex operator Metro Pacific Tollways is allowed to push for toll fee increases every 3 years. The last toll hike took effect May last year, but this was based off petitions back in 2011 and 2014. But the good news is, PUV drivers and operators will be exempted from paying higher toll fees. They just need to enroll their RFIDs in the Abante Card program of Cavitex to enjoy old toll rates. But take note, this toll review program only runs for 3 months. After that, it's back to existing toll rates. Sean?
Thanks for clearing that up. Patrick Lucky, thank you.
With back-to-back fuel price hikes, there's also back-to-back concerns from transport groups. We'll be speaking with LTFRB Technical Division Chief Joel Bolano over these issues. Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, ladies, and good evening to all your viewers. Thank you for inviting us.
Okay, sir, sunod-sunod na naman yung pagtaas ng presyo ng petrolyo, and of course, we expect another round of fuel subsidies. When will be the next rollout, and what will be the process of availing?
Yes, for this year, we have another budget allocated for the fuel subsidy. The DOTR and the LTFRB starting to implement it, hopefully baka before the end of August. And all qualified beneficiaries na dito, lalo na yung mga PUVs natin, will receive the amount for the subsidy via their accounts, or kung may mga previous PPP card na sila, yung iba naman isa e-wallet, yung may mga account na rin sa mga banks, doon po isi-send yung kanilang mga benefits or yung subsidy na ibibigay po ng ating pamahalaan.
Sir, are we talking about the same beneficiaries or meron ng ibang nakasama dun sa mga previous groups?
Correct. Yung bagong list natin, may mga new beneficiaries dito. Kaya yung iba na dati na, mayroon na silang mga card. Kaya doon na rin ididiretso yung kanilang mga subsidy.
So that's for the subsidies. What about this latest petition for a 2 peso fare hike for jeepneys? How likely are you to approve it?
Well, my letter request actually received an office last week. It will be deliberated tomorrow on the letter request. We will just wait for the decision of the board kung ano yung moving forward. Kasi usually, ang nare-receive ni LTFRB is a verified petition. Ito ngayon kasi is just a letter request anchored doon po sa circular natin on the formula for fare. Kaya ang magiging way nito is pag-uusapan mo po muna ito sa isang board meeting tomorrow ng ating LTFRB board kung ano yung magiging decision po moving forward.
Alright, kumusta na po, sir, yung ating cash card system, no? This is how you disburse subsidies and benefits for the PUV drivers. Perfected na ba natin tong siste? Gawa ng medyo matagal na rin siyang ongoing.
Yes, kaya nga yung mga list ng beneficiaries ay naka-ready na siya. Kaya as early as this time, ina-announce na natin nationwide through our regional offices na yung mga beneficiaries na may mga PPP card na for the past issuance of this subsidy ay ina-announce na natin na doon din pagka sila ay part of this beneficiary ngayon ulit. So doon naman sa mga wala ay na-advise na rin na magkakaroon po sila ng opening ng kanilang PPP card. So o kaya doon naman sa mga iba na may sariling account, doon po ididiretso yung kanilang mga subsidy.
Sir Joel, curious lang ako, no? May isang group, transport group, di ko sure kung Alto, Dapito, or Piston. I could be wrong. But I clearly remember yung petition niya is i-adjust daw ang basic fare sa paggalaw ng presyo ng petrolyo. How possible is it to approve such a move? Of course, to an average consumer and commuter, it does make sense. Para kunyari, mas mahal yung gasolina, di mas maintindihan mo, you have to shell out. Tapos pag mas mura, babawasan yung fare. Hindi po ba to possible?
Actually, yun nga po yung nangyari doon sa kanilang, instead na verified petition yung ipa-file po nila, they filed only the letter of request. Kasi mayroon nga kaming MC na mayroong formula for the rates na mag-a-adjust siya dependent on the fuel prices. Pero mayroon pong mga timelines po yun. But under the MC also, it provides also for the board to look for other sources of, like for example, inputs. Kung may mga changes, new studies, o kaya may mga bagong current situation, ay pwede rin ma-modify o kaya pwede rin ang board mag-add o mag-change doon sa formula. Yun po yung ginawa nila ngayon instead of a verified petition. But then again, it will still be deliberated or discussed by the board itong letter nila on the merit siguro of the fare increase na nire-request nila para doon din sa discussion siguro ng board ay gagawin nila kung ano yung magiging way forward considering that this is a letter request instead of the verified petition na automatic siniset for hearing yan as a process for the petition for increase of fare.
Ganun rin po ba ang sentiment, sir, with regard to the rush hour special fare na petition?
Yung sa ang tawag natin din surge yung parang surge fee. May petition sila last year pa yon kaya lang during the process bumaba yung mga prices natin ng fuel kaya hindi na siya agad na resolve pa. So ngayon po because of the letter request na-set aside muna at ito munang petition itong letter request for increase ngayon ang tinututukan po ng ating LTFRB board.
Okay. Sir, bus operators are asking to reopen traditional bus routes. Parang meron yata silang problema dun sa EDSA carousel, no? Lumiliit yata yung kita nila eh. So what's the plan of the agency on this?
For the past few weeks, the LTFRB and the city buses conducted a consultation meeting with them para po maayos po itong mga city bus routes. So, the LTFRB currently studying kung paano po yung mga request po ng ating city bus na maayos po itong mga dati nila mga routes. So, doon po sa mga MCs na nilabas ng LTFRB, we are given at least 30 days to at least issue another circular as far as the city bus routes is concerned para po doon kung ano na po yung magiging yung result ng pag-aaral po ni LTFRB doon sa city bus routes.
All right. Thank you for joining us, LTFRB Technical Division Chief Joel Balano. Up next, former broadcaster Jay Sonza gets arrested for a non-bailable offense. That and more when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back. You are still watching the big story here on One News. The Philippine peso continues to tumble against the US dollar, but it's not all bad news, at least according to the Bangko Sentral. The local currency closed at 56.84 against the US dollar, down from Monday's trading. It has now lost around 2 pesos in value since the start of the month, according to the Bankers Association of the Philippines. But BSP Governor Eli Remolona is keeping a positive outlook. He says that while the peso did weaken, it's not as bad as when you look at it compared to the other currencies in the region.
Compared to our neighbors, the peso has weakened only slightly. This depreciation is smaller than those of our neighbors.
And in other news, controversial TV host Jay Sonza is currently under police custody for alleged estafa and large-scale illegal recruitment. We have no details yet on these charges against the former broadcaster, but according to the NBI, Sonza attempted to leave the country for Hong Kong on July 18, but was stopped by immigration after finding out that there is a warrant of arrest against Sonza. He was then turned over by the immigration to the NBI.
Supposed to be papunta siya ng Hong Kong dahil attend siya ng isang meeting ng organization. Tinanong kung alam niya itong kaso na to. So hindi naman niya dininay. So nakipag-cooperate siya sa mga authorities.
I was gonna say that you also had the BJMP
Yes,
spokesperson earlier on your other show, sa totoo lang,
Yes,
right?
but he still doesn't have any details about the case of Sonsa. Kasi
Only
parang dinala lang
na iniwan sa
kanila
kanila.
eh. Oo,
From
naiwan, no?
NBI, so naka-isolate pala si Jay Sonsa for now kasi ganun pala yung protocol sa BJMP just to make sure na walang virus
Kumbaga
or
may
whatever.
kulungan na quarantine facility.
Yes, parang
Yeah.
naka-quarantine
For COVID.
sila
Okay.
and marirelease siya dun sa ordinary jail,
Jail.
detention cell, once
After
na na-clear na.
Oh, wow. They're
ng
still doing
after
COVID
antigen test.
protocols.
Pero ang
Yes.
point is, wala rin siyang alam kung ano yung
Wala rin
charge.
siyang alam. But anyway, girls, let's get more details on Sonsa's arrest from Yeda Pascual. Yeda, July 18 pa na aresto, bakit ngayon lang to lumabas?
That's right, Masaya. Sonsa was under NBI custody for over 2 weeks until August 3 when he was transferred to a BJMP quarantine facility in Payatas. He will be transferred to a Quezon City jail after quarantine, pursuant to the order of the Quezon City Regional Trial Court, Branch 100. Though Sonsa can apply for bail for his estafa charge, large-scale illegal recruitment is a non-bailable offense. With this, his camp decided not to apply for bail. Currently, we are still trying to find out the details of these charges against Sonsa. The BJMP could not provide the details as they were not the ones who arrested the TV host. Sonsa's camp has yet to release a statement on the matter. Mase?
Thank you, Yeda.
So one of the charges pala is non-bailable
Non-bailable.
syndicated recruitment.
Illegal recruitment.
Nako, nako. Delikado. Anyways, operations to assist distressed OFWs in Maui are now underway. The Foreign Affairs Department said there will be a consular mission to try and get more information about the Filipinos affected by the wildfires in Hawaii. Up to this point, the DFA and local authorities in Hawaii have not confirmed whether there are Filipino casualties. The Maui Filipino Chamber of Commerce has since appealed for help from the national government following the wildfires that have killed nearly 100 people. The death toll is expected to rise in the coming days.
We're going to pause for another quick break, but right after that, the Samahang Basketball ng Pilipinas says that the Philippines is ready to host the FIBA World Cup, which officially kicks off in 10 days. The details when we return. Keep it here on The Big Story.
You're still watching the big story here on One News.
And it's all systems go for the 2023 FIBA World Cup. The Samahang Basketball ng Pilipinas, or SBP, has expressed confidence about the country's hosting of the biggest hoops tournament in the world. At the Philippine Sports Writer Association Forum earlier today, SBP President Al Panlilio said he's hoping that the Philippines will be able to stage the grandest hosting of the FIBA World Cup ever. Panlilio is also optimistic that the country will be able to surpass the 32,616 attendance record, which was set during the 1994 FIBA World Championship.
Everybody's ready to go. I'm hoping the best World Cup ever for FIBA in terms of not only showing the world that we can host a global event like this, but really the hospitality of the Filipino people, the smiles, the generosity of our people. I'm sure they'll feel that.
In line with these preparations for the FIBA World Cup, the Naismith Trophy, which arrived on Monday in Cebu, has been touring around the Mactan Shrine, Cebu-Cordova Link Expressway, and Fort San Pedro. Gila sharpshooters Gary David and Jeff Chan were present throughout the tour, where they also showcased the trophy at the SM Seaside Cebu City. Up next is the Davao Tour, as the trophy will visit the People's Park, Philippine Eagle Center, and Malagos Chocolate Museum.
I feel like that's a totally doable goal, right? Kasi 32,616 yung record, the last record that was set during the 1994 FIBA World Championship. I mean, what's the capacity of Philippine Arena, right?
It is 50,000,
Yeah.
but I believe only the opening games will be played at the arena.
Yeah.
So it would have to be beat early on.
Feeling ko kayang-kaya
the
because
rest
there's so
of-
much more excitement this time around.
The rest of the games will be played out divided in Araneta and
MOA
Moa Fish
Arena, that's right.
Right. So dapat sa start pa lang, do you want to be part of the record-breaking above 36,000 crowd? Sounds exciting.
And I don't think it will be
definitely
difficult
does.
because there's a lot of Filipino basketball fans.
Exactly.
Because they're holding it in the Philippines.
And it's been so long
Exactly.
since we last hosted. That's why there's like there's much more interest on it this time around, FIBA. And then there's social media, of course. With
So in 10 days, I think, again, August 25, it's about to kick off. So if you haven't gotten your tickets, so many NBA stars will be playing. Of course, some have already announced that they're not coming, but for the most part, so many big stars are coming here. I know everyone's excited. Like every guy I know is excited, and even some girls. All right, we are running out of time, but before we go, time for our big picture tonight. No, it is not basketball related. What you're seeing are parents cleaning chairs during the Brigada Eskwela activity at the President Corazon C. Aquino Elementary School in Batasan Road, Quezon City. The week-long nationwide volunteer works will run until August 19. Now, aside from parents, community officials, teachers, and students, as well as other stakeholders, also join in the activities to help public schools prepare for the opening of classes on August 29. Tama naman kasi, every year may balik eskwela.
May
Kasi
balik
nakapunta na ako yung Alagang Kapatid Foundation, they held some. So I was actually able to try and do a balik eskwela. You just paint chairs, classrooms.
Yesterday.
You were covering it.
You were there.
I was
Yeah.
in FIMAPA High School
Yesterday.
yesterday with President Bongbong Marcos and VP Sara Duterte. They painted 2 chairs and then nag-donate si PBBM ng 1 million
million,
pesos
Oh,
sa
wow.
VIMAPA
Okay.
For that
Brigada
school?
Eskwela.
Is that
For that school
out
lang.
of pocket niya yun, yung 1 million?
Baka naman from Office of the President, as we all know, malaki yung kanilang funds.
Sana doon na lang.
So baka doon naman ang galing.
Di ba
I don't
wishful
know.
thinking? Mali mo, doon na pupunta yung confidential funds.
oh.
Diba?
Did he
Diba?
seem? What was his reaction to seeing the school? Did he seem pleased at how preparations were going? Was he dissatisfied?
He looked satisfied.
He looked-
At least yung naging reaction niya yesterday.
Si
he
VP
looked
Sara.
satisfied.
Hindi,
si
President-
PBBM. But
Oo,
the
si
thing
VP
is, of course, they admitted na meron pang mga schools na
Yes.
hindi pa ready because of Typhoon Egay
Of
and
course.
Falcon.
Right.
So, because of that, there is still a possibility na blended pa rin yung ilang
Right.
parts ng schools, public schools.
Siyempre, we
so,
know,
opening
diba,
on August 29.
August 29 ang opening ng public school. So paano yun? Kasi anong sabi nila kung di daw matuloy, no, yung mga schools na affected, di pa na naayos, de-delay yung opening or tuloy pa rin pero blended?
tuloy pa rin.
Pero
blended na lang siya. Hybrid muna. Kasi syempre, ayaw naman nila na mag-stop muna yung opening ng classes because of the typhoon. Dun damages na ginawa ng typhoon. So blended learning.
Which is a fair point, right?
Yeah.
Especially after the pandemic, after the long lockdown, right?
And our dismal results in
Yun na
assessment.
nga,
So,
yun na
di ba, kailan matuloy ang klase? And that's it for the show tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.